to the BBB BrainTrust podcast, where you learn who to trust from the people you trust. My name is James Marin. I am the marketplace investigator for BBB, serving Dallas, Lubbock, and Wichita Falls. In today's episode, we are honored to speak with international investigation specialist Brian Edwards about the latest BBB International Investigations Initiative scam study that focuses on scams relating to online gambling, online casinos, and other related topics. Here is that discussion. Thank you, Brian, for joining us today on our episode of the BBB BrainTrust podcast. You are out of St. Louis, BBB, and you are basically part of compiling and analyzing the data used by BBB for its scam studies. Tell us a little bit more about your background as well as how you got involved working on the scam studies.
Yeah, so I'm part of the International Investigations Initiative, it's called. And essentially what that is, I am primarily based out of St. Louis, but this is a position that's assisted by the BBBs in Dallas, Chicago, and Omaha as well. So it's kind of a collaboration between those four BBBs. And what we're really doing is, like you said, we're creating these scam studies, which dig into either the scam reports that we get, or sometimes with this newest one, which we'll get into a bit here as well, with business complaints that we've had as well. And I've been involved in the role for about 3 years. My background is as an investigative journalist, and so I'm kind of putting those skills to use, kind of digging into complaints that people have, following different trails of businesses or scammers, whatever that is, and trying to make a compelling story, essentially, about what is happening in the world when it comes to different types of fraud or bad business practices.
Investigative journalism, I like that. Were you previously working for a media outlet, or did you work perhaps in law enforcement?
I've had many roles. I was a newspaper reporter, so I was a staff reporter. I'm originally from Minnesota, but I was a staff reporter in Alabama for a while at a paper down there. I covered city and county politics. I've got a master's degree in investigative journalism, and I've written for several national outlets. I've written for and recorded for National Public Radio, and I've written for ProPublica as well. And I've done writing in the past for Gannett and the Associated Press, so kind of all over the place before coming to the BBB.
I'm familiar with most of those, so that's pretty good. No, that's fantastic. That is truly a diverse background if you're working for those different outfits. I know just from reading those. And as far as, I guess, kind of the analytical side of what you do, tell us a little bit about that. Have you always been either interested in deep diving with data, or is it just something about scams or investigations that draws your attention?
No, this has always kind of been a part of my work. I think that every great, piece that attempts to inform people, you need to, not only show that there's a problem, but you need to show the scope of the problem, that it's a continuing problem. And I think the best way to do that is always through data. You are able to dig into these large sets, and essentially you're not even compiling a narrative, you're finding the narrative within that data and then using that to craft the rest of the story that you're telling. So I've always been attracted to kind of these long form, longer term type projects. And I think that a data backbone, as I call it, is an invaluable piece of telling that story.
Fantastic. I would agree. After looking at the different scam studies over the handful of years, I can appreciate what goes into it. So first of all, thank you for being a part of helping us try to, fight the bad guys in this seemingly almost endless battle that we're in with them. But that's how things move in the information age, I guess. Let's get a little bit to this particular scam study. So this scam study will be published on August the 20th of 2025. Do I have that correct?
You do, yeah.
Fantastic. And from what I understand, the focus of the data on this is going to relate to online gambling specifically, as well as online casinos. And while we consider that to be gambling, we're very specific about that, given that those types of platforms are very specific in how they try to interact with potential scam victims and consumers. So let me ask you real quick, personal life, are you interested, do you partake in anything like this? Like whether it's a online gambling, sports betting, or do you partake in some kind of online casino game?
So personally, I don't. I would say that I am well acquainted after writing this study with the various forms. And I am a sports watcher, and I think anybody who has watched sports over the last 5 years has seen the explosion of sports betting in that realm, just like lines and odds being presented on TV. So it's something that I've been pretty familiar with for quite a while, even if I'm not necessarily intimately involved with the everyday of it, maybe.
I can understand that. I was very much in your position for a good part of my life. And then I, like many consumers, when they struck down the federal ban, I decided to try my hand at it. And I guess, just average success, some wins, some losses, nothing life changing and also nothing life shattering, which I think is great. I think that's the good position to be in, just to do it for fun. I'm definitely in the cohort that decided to try it after that federal ban was knocked down. And just to give you just a couple numbers that I just found, simple search. It says here that after the ban was struck down in 2018, and just for our listeners and viewers, that ban was to the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, and it was struck down in 2018. As of now, about nearly 40 states and the District of Columbia have some form of legalized sports betting, and about 30 of those states allow for it to be done online. Now, for disclosure, where I'm at, Texas, that is not one of the states that allows it. So when I partake, I actually have to go to another state to consume that. Does Missouri allow any kind of sports betting, whether it's at a physical location or online?
That's one I don't know offhand. So I'm actually,
Okay.
despite being based out of, we'll have to edit this, but despite being based out of St. Louis, I actually live in New York. So New
Oh,
York does
okay.
have,
New York does, right?
it does, correct. Yes. So
Okay.
New York
Okay.
does, but I'm unsure about Missouri actually. So
Okay. Basically, yes, where you're at. Do you have coworkers or family or any just friends that have mentioned dabbling or doing it?
absolutely. I've had friends who visited before who have, known that it's legal in New York, who've, partook once they've come, and I certainly have bumped into people who've, are interested, at various levels, kind of like you said, from the casual, oh well, it's legal now. Maybe I'll try it out, to people who are, certainly much more involved with it. So yeah, I'd say it's hard to avoid at this point, is what I would say, even if you're not personally involved.
Right, I would agree. And so that's another reason why I think the scam studies focusing on that is coming at a perfect time. Disclosure, we're recording this on August the 12th. In less than a month, we've got the start of the NFL and the college football season. So we definitely want to get this word out before anybody steps in a pitfall that they're unaware of. How long exactly have the international studies been published? Because I've only been with BBB a little over 6 years. My understanding is that they weren't always a thing. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I'm actually only the kind of the second person in the role who has done these. My predecessor was the first person who had done it. It's been less than 10 years still since we've been publishing these studies. So they are relatively new, in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the BBB's work.
Were you like a smaller part or a background part of the previous investigations from your predecessor, or did you come in completely fresh
No, I came on
when
actually as the replacement for him, and so
okay.
we've got a dedicated team that works on these scam studies, but it's typically just kind of one person who's spearheading the information gathering, putting together the reports, and all of the preliminary work. And my predecessor was just retiring, and so I ended up taking over the role for him.
I never had the chance to meet that individual, but I did see their name on plenty of the emails when it came time for the scam study.
Yeah,
So all right, you're number two guy. All right, you have a
yeah.
chance in shaping how this works. Let's get to the studies. What was there anything just off the top of your head that when it was all said and done, that you looked at it and you were like, huh, or wow, I didn't think that I would find this out, but here's what the data tells me. Was there anything surprising like that?
The top level one was, so it's important to note that for this study, a lot of these studies cover strictly just scams, but we also looked at what are what it was called, kind of gray market
Mm.
online gambling here, which is not necessarily that it's a scam, but it is not licensed here in the US. And so there are very little legal protections involved. These are typically overseas endeavors. The data on, both outright scams and gray markets is a little cloudy because, of course, those are gray markets. But what I was
Mm.
shocked to find is that, at least according to some estimates, the amount of money that is spent on gray market and illegal gambling is actually larger than the amount spent on legal gambling. So this is a ginormous industry, if you want to call it that, that is essentially operating in this unseen area.
So I want to get this straight. Now, again, I've only partaken in legal here in the States, but you're saying that the information and data that we've gathered is actually saying that it dwarfs the legal side. Can you give me an example? Like just one example of a gray market or a gray platform, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the study, one of them that we mentioned is Bovada, which is a really, really well-known website that people use, have reported placing wagers, getting payouts, essentially using this like you would an online casino. This is a company that's kind of got a checkered past, has gotten in trouble with both the US and Canada at
Mm.
times. But there is no state there are no states in the US where they are a licensed gambling establishment. Yet anyone in the US who isn't in a state that has explicitly banned Bovada, which some of them have, but if you are in a state that has not explicitly banned them, you can log on and gamble with them, despite the fact that they are not a licensed casino or sports book in the US. And so that's what kind of falls into this gray market here. And that's because, despite you had mentioned shorthand as PAPSA for the federal gambling law that there was, essentially what it was is, originally it was banned federally, but what wasn't banned was it was never illegal for people themselves to, gamble overseas, essentially. So these companies were taking advantage of being overseas and allowing Americans to gamble on their websites. And they're continuing to do that still.
Okay, they're still using it, even if some of those people may have access to a legal slash registered platform.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And part of what the study wanted to clear up is we feel that some people actually don't even necessarily know sometimes when they're using a licensed gambling
Hmm.
organization and when they're not. That's not all the time. I think plenty of people do know, but I think there is a lot of confusion because there's so many different laws between state to state after that federal rule was struck down.
So I have a question. Given the rise of people just wanting to do it because they know they can here in the United States, and then you have these new businesses that have popped up, like, for instance, I'm going to use them as an example, prize picks, where you are giving them money, an account that you can use for yourself to wager against performance, maybe not outcomes, but performances. Where does that fall? Like, where does something like that fall where I can do that in the state of Texas? It's not illegal. But yet there are other states like Louisiana where I don't think they allow prize picks, but they do allow online gambling. So I know what they're doing, but where does it fall with our focus for a study like this?
Yeah, so that kind of falls under the bucket of what a lot of people call daily fantasy sports, which is just kind of another term that has cropped up amid all of this. But the reality is that you're right, that there's a lot of mixed laws around this, but also opinions about what this is as well. I think proponents of it would say that this is different than gambling because it's a skill game, is what they say, that it's closer to playing something that you believe you are good at and attempting to, earn a reward for that. Opponents have said those are very fancy words to call something.
Mm,
And so there's
mm.
very mixed opinions about that. And prize picks, we mentioned them in the study as
Oh,
well.
wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, so this app that absolutely is one of these very complicated areas that we're getting into, is legal in some states, not legal in others. It's there's a lot for people to sort through when they deal with these, but that certainly, according to the view of the study, is still it's living within the realm of sports betting, even if it is a different beast on its own.
Okay, so that's good to know. Like, we consider it absolutely within the realm and the category that the scam study is trying to focus on. You don't consider them one of these gray markets. Is
No,
that
so
correct?
I would say that that
Oh, they
is
qualify.
absolutely a gray market. So I would say it's not
Okay.
fully sports betting, but it lives near the idea of sports betting. And I think it's an important thing to note for this one. You know, we do call these scam studies, but this is a report that is talking about legitimate businesses as well. And so Prize Picks is not, from what we have seen out there, you know, scamming people. It's just that it lives within this gray area and is one of those tougher ones to classify essentially.
Right, I would agree with you. And again, to be fully transparent, we know Prize Picks is a legitimate operating business, and it operates only in the states that it's legal and allowed to. That I can affirm. Curious because I know, like I said, a lot of those styles of gamification of sports. I've seen it. I've seen it when out just viewing sports, you know, and restaurants with other people, and you know, you just get to talk because you see people messing on their phones or they see you, and you know, this is how information gets shared, you know, at least for me, a lot of word of mouth, but you have to be like in the community or among the community. Let's say for our consumers, if I make the decision that I want to participate in something like this, what would be a way that you could instruct them to verify or at least perhaps get the most information that would make them feel secure in participating in whichever platform?
Yeah, I think the key here is whether you are either in the US or Canada, you go to either your state or your province and you go to, they have different names, but often it would be called gaming boards, gaming commissions, something like that. And you look online at your board or commission and you figure out which organizations are licensed. That is, in my opinion, the first step that anybody should be taking before they decide that they want to do any type of gambling or gaming online. And doing that is nearly foolproof because you might not have good luck when you do it still, but these are heavily regulated bodies by those, you know, states or provinces, and so they're at least required to apply by, you know, fair use, fair rules and things like that when it comes to gaming, the same as a physical casino would as well. And it's as soon as you step outside of those licensed organizations is when you can possibly run into trouble.
Understood. And because you bring up a very good point that BBB is in Canada as well, and they also like to sports bet, was there anything that you found out that surprised you as a stark difference between what our Canadian neighbors are doing versus what those of the US do?
I think the biggest thing is I didn't realize this is that Canada went through a similar time where, you know, they had a national, you know, rules around it, but what they actually did is wholesale legalized
Oh,
online gambling at
okay.
once essentially. So it's legal in every single
Everywhere.
province, including iGaming, which is another category that we call that, and that's kind of just the umbrella
Hmm.
term that we use for things like playing like a slot machine or poker or blackjack online for money. So other casino style games that you could play, and that's legal throughout Canada. But similar to the U.S., they have, you know, strict licensure rules around who can and can't operate these types of organizations.
Thank you for mentioning the online poker, blackjack, traditional styles, because I can't speak for everybody, but I do know that a lot of me and my friends in our cohort or generation, we first encountered online gambling or anything that could be called that with the rise of the World Series of Poker
Yeah,
on ESPN. And then you had all these sites open up as real online poker, win real money. And to us, that was even like, it just felt taboo. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to give my money online. And how do I know I'm going to get money back?
yeah,
You know,
yeah. No,
look
that
how
was
far we've come.
yeah. You're totally right, though. That was absolutely, I think, for many people, their first glimpse into the world of gaming online was online poker.
We will talk about some of the warning signs. I'll have you go over at least maybe like the top three or so that you were able to suss out from the data. Because we're dealing with platforms that are digital, is there anything that can stick out as a red flag in the actual programming of the game itself? Maybe something that works a little funny that you're like, if you see this, you should know that this is absolutely not how the game should work.
We didn't necessarily come across any red flags on that front. I think for better or for worse, most of these games are quite simple, and so they're easy games to program.
Mm.
One thing we did note, there are websites where you can easily go and buy pre-made, casino style games that anybody could roll out essentially for cheap, for $20 essentially. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah, so these are pretty simple programs to make, and so yeah, there certainly aren't any signs, at least easy signs, that we would want people to be looking for. I think there are other ways to protect yourselves essentially.
All right. So I just want to make sure I have that clear because I didn't know that either. That there's simply a plug and play kinds of templates out there to just create a casino style game or app. That's actually a little disconcerting, but it actually explains why so many of these apps roll out. It seems like
Yep,
so fast. So there's a whole
exactly.
industry there. Maybe that we should look into that.
So people will be able to
Awesome.
read at least briefly about that. Yeah.
Way to go. Thank you for including that. If you can, give me at least maybe like the top three signs a consumer or anybody interacting with these things should, be alerted to that should cause them to pause and question whether or not this is legitimate.
Yeah. So we have touched on one of them. If they are located overseas, that should immediately
Good.
be
Big
raising a red
flag.
flag. That is the biggest one. The next one would be around payouts and big
Okay.
promises of payouts. There are plenty of bonuses and things like that that are absolutely legitimate, but I think you will see. I think everybody knows, even if they don't necessarily want to know, and something feels too good to be true. And if you're seeing this,
Mm,
really big promise of payout or guarantees of payout and things like that, that's something you should be watching out for. And then I think the third one to watch out for is payments that are done through cryptocurrency as well. There are no legal operators, at least yet. I know that cryptocurrency is, being adopted more widely, but as of right now, that is certainly a red flag as well.
very good. Yeah, most of those, I think some, people will be familiar with to some extent. Um, the crypto part is something I've noticed in my investigations for BBB. And when we process our scam trackers relating to the gambling, I always look for something mentioning crypto or specifically a type of crypto, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, something to that extent. What about payments that they take? Is there any sign about the type of payment platform or type of payment that the online platform is essentially soliciting you to use? Now, I know we talked about crypto, but are there others that maybe should be a tipping point of
Yeah.
concern?
Yeah, I would certainly be nervous if anything was through a cash payment style app like Venmo, Zelle, Cash App, things like that. Those are just, those are legitimate companies. We use them all the time. They are great and absolutely helpful. But they themselves warn people about scammers attempting to use their platforms to solicit money from people. So absolutely anybody, if they're being asked to deposit money through those platforms, that should be a huge red flag as well.
For those who they do it, they bite, they take part, they make the payment, all that good stuff. Is there any kind of recourse for somebody who loses money through a cash payment, a P2P platform versus, if they use crypto or a credit card, maybe to help them?
All lawyers would not want anybody to say there is never any recourse, but I think we're pretty happy to strongly say there is little recourse. So
Okay.
that is a risk that somebody is taking by doing that. And if they
Mm.
have done that, unfortunately, still worth it to, report it to us, report to the FTC, the FBI, your attorney general, the local gaming board, but hopes of recovering that money, I wouldn't necessarily be placing my bets on that.
Yeah, even if you trust your money platform, that doesn't mean that it makes the gaming platform any more legitimate
Correct.
than it likely is. Is there any way that a consumer could be proactive in protecting their financial information or anything like that before they try to participate in any of these games, whether it's a legitimate one or a scam?
Don't use a similar username and password on one of these websites that you use for secure accounts like your bank accounts. be careful about linking, bank accounts with like routing numbers and things like that, or giving out that number, and just being careful with sensitive information. People do with some legitimate sites, they will require people to verify their identity with things like IDs and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So it is a part of this that people might need to be prepared for that type of behavior, because some of these businesses will have so-called know your customer rules where they're required to make sure that somebody is who they say they are. But that doesn't mean that somebody shouldn't always at least be thinking and doing their research when somebody asks for something like a photo of their ID or something like that.
Understood. Yes, and again, like I said, I've participated in the legitimate casinos, or online betting platforms, and you're correct. They will want to confirm your identity before they let you do anything, essentially, and it's done online. You're right. They will ask for your ID, and they'll hold that information because basically, just like a real casino, if for some reason they feel that you are doing something you shouldn't be, they'll knock you off. That is not saying that I've done that. I'm just saying I know
Yes.
the how they operate on that. Are there tools or anything that consumers could use to basically steer away from that? They're dead set on participating in this kind of activity. What, if anything, can they do that is separate from a sketchy platform?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that if they want to go and find who is licensed in their state, that is always a good idea. Going through that is essentially a list of what is not a
Yeah.
sketchy platform.
Yeah.
But if you have questions as well, BB Scam Tracker, you can look up the names of a website that you're thinking about using. Websites like Scam Advisor, well, that's not a perfect tool. These are at least tools that people can use to look up different apps or websites if they want to try to figure out, what they're about, essentially.
So let's talk about how BBB can help these individuals. I mean, obviously, we put out the scam study. We're giving you, ways to find them, ways to recognize it, what to do to prevent, as well as, who you're going to call. What is it BBB can do for individuals if they believe that they have been a victim of a online gambling or casino scam?
One, we are offering a way for them to add their story, to the list of scams that we have, which over time builds on these reports that we write and allows us to inform regulators, lawmakers about the scams that are happening. So there's kind of this, I would call this like altruistic, larger picture thing that we can do, which is use their story to help hopefully convince those who make laws and enforce them on the best ways to protect people. We have resources for people to call, but what we can also do is it's still not always clear, even if we hand over all the resources, what to do step by step. We, I do it plenty, are certainly happy to sit down with people and walk them through that process as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not only providing the resources, we're willing to help people essentially make it through kind of the gauntlet of all that reporting, what accounts to check, what to do, run through that checklist with them essentially. And so I hope that, people who they have dealt with a scam, they feel empowered to reach out to VUV, not just to read our information, but hopefully they're doing that as well, but as kind of an advocate in that process as well.
And where can they actually look at the scam study, the full study, when it's published on August the 20th? Where can they find that online?
Yeah, all of our scam studies can be found at bbb.org/scam studies, and go there and it will be right at the top. We kind of keep them in order of when they were published, and they can read that one and the many other scam studies we've done as well.
That was going to be my next question, is if they want to look at other old ones, they can find it at the same webpage.
That's correct.
Fantastic. I'll say as well, if you believe that you've been a victim, please report to the Better Business Bureau at bbb.org/scam tracker. There are real people that process those. We're not AI like a lot of these businesses are going. So you're dealing with real people. They have a little knowledge on maybe the same things that you've gone through. What I would also say is the FTC you can report to, the FBI. Is there any other kind of law enforcement agency that a victim could potentially report to if they believe they've had money taken?
Yeah, I always recommend people report to their attorney general as well. Often
Attorney General.
attorneys general are the ones who are maybe bringing these like bigger cases once they've had a lot of reports. And so it's important to report because maybe you're the first one, but maybe you're the 50th, and you're going to be that
Mm.
person that tips that office over to say, hey, I should do something about this. We're getting a lot of reports about this.
Just one thing relating to the study. Was there any one type of online gaming that just overwhelmingly had the most victims or largest dollar amount?
I wouldn't say that there necessarily was any one type, but I think one thing that people should keep in mind that we haven't really talked about is when it comes to these like slots style games, even ones that are supposedly free to play, some of them have gotten in trouble for, saying that they are not gambling, but then courts have found that they are gambling. So I think that slot style games, whether paid or not, are very tricky and people should watch out for because it's just hard to parse through kind of what the true intentions of both those companies and the overarching idea behind them, what they are.
I think we're getting close to the end of our time. So I do appreciate this again, Brian. Honestly, appreciate all the background work, the stuff that we don't get to see until we see the final result, which is the scam study. But I will say they're always well organized, easy to follow. I've looked at them online after they're published. I'm impressed. I'm glad that somebody's doing the work there behind the scenes. I look forward to more conversations as we have future studies that come out. We have one more scam study that will be released this year. Can you just give us a little bit of a sneak peek on that?
The final one of the year will actually be an update to one that we have updated a few times, but we're looking at pet scams as well. And we're looking at some new twists. They are still incredibly common, unfortunately. Putting that out later this year, especially as people may be starting to think about gift buying and things for the holidays. So that's what we've got coming up here at the end of the year.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you, Brian. Look forward to this scam study. Again, August 20th, everybody, is when you can find it online. Thank you, Brian. You have a nice day.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you again to Brian Edwards for joining us on this discussion. For our viewers, please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on your platform of choice so that you are alerted to new episodes as they are published. You have a nice day.